Aloha, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I'm super excited. I am one of the co-hosts, Selena Konmaki, and this right here is one of my favorite people, Anna Larson. Anna, tell everybody about today's show.
I am so excited for today's show. Now, if this is your first live stream that you've come to with the Folk Institute, we started these live streams so we could share more about what the Folk Institute is doing and to bring the important conversations that are happening to you. This is about growing personally. This is about growing professionally. This could be about building stronger workplace teams and having conversations on diversity and equity and inclusiveness, initiatives and topics that your organization and that you should be thinking about. So today we're talking about empowering caregivers and individuals with disabilities and where their place is and how they have unique attributes and that they are a powerful asset for your team. So we're super excited to have both Dr. Carrie Spell-Hansson from the CEO and founder of the Folk Institute, and Rebeca Emerson with Exceptional Families of the Military with us today to be talking about that conversation. So
I know. Aren't you so excited that we, just a little tidbit, Anna and I are both military affiliated. And so we're so excited that Dr. Carrie has Rebeca on today, just kind of coming from that part of our world. So sorry, I was so excited. I needed to jump in and say that.
Yeah. So if you're listening, drop in the comments any questions that you might have. Tell us where you're listening from. Let us know that you're here. We can answer questions while we're going live. That's what Selena and I are here for, to facilitate. But otherwise, I think we're ready to get started. Let's pull up those bios and let everyone know who they're going to be hearing from today. All right, so Selena is muted, but she's going to unmute herself and then she's going to restart this.
This should be a game that we have to see how many minutes we can get into it before Anna has to tell me. And according to our clock, it's 2 minutes and 34 seconds today. All right. One of my most favorite humans on the planet is Dr. Carrie Spell-Hansson. I just absolutely am so blessed to be in her space, but she is a thought leader, researcher, educator, and trusted advisor in organizational development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She founded the Folk Institute in 2004 to further the impactful work she was doing. Carrie is also an experienced keynote speaker and training facilitator that has offered workshops throughout the Americas, Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Caribbean. I can go on and on and on because she is just wonderful and amazing. So let's also gander about our other guest that is just as amazing.
Yes. So we're going to pull up the slide here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Rebeca Emerson, the Associate Director of Exceptional Families of the Military. So Rebeca has been leading within Exceptional Families of the Military, a 501c3 nonprofit, since 2020. That means she joined during COVID. I'm just going to throw that out there. Rebeca retired from active duty in the Air Force and served in a variety of leadership and management roles. The bulk of her 23-year military experience was a government contracting officer, but her passion was redirected when her youngest son was born with Down syndrome. Rebeca now advocates full-time and has advocacy experience at the state and national levels. She has a passion for assisting disability-connected military families wherever they need it most. So we're super excited to have Rebeca here. I think this conversation between her and Dr. Carrie are going to be absolutely amazing. And so without further conversation, I'm going to bring them both up, and so we can say hi.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Good morning, Carrie. You are muted, just to let you know.
So, it was a test. It was a test to see if you would notice that I was muted.
It's like my job. I'm like the mute, the mute catcher.
She'll let us all know because we have wonderful things to say. I think I'm so excited about today's conversation with Rebeca today, Dr. Carrie. Anytime that there is a strong advocator and someone that is uses their voice to kind of make things better or seen, I just love. And I love that this is our conversation today.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. So why don't we get started with our thought of the month? Now, these thoughts of the month, we are frequently found in our Folk Institute monthly newsletter. If you are not currently signed up for that, I'm going to be dropping a link while we talk about this quote, where you can get signed up. It comes one time per month, and it contains so much great information in it. But our thought today is, I wish for a world that views disability, mental or physical, not as a hindrance, but as unique attributes that can be seen as powerful assets if given the right opportunities. Carrie, can you talk a little bit about why this quote is so powerful and so important?
Well, because, because of the 30 plus years that I've been doing diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the things that I've been passionate about, passionate about is understanding that we all bring a uniqueness. And as we were looking at the quote, and I started thinking about, I remember when my son, my question to myself was, why is it that we have such a difficult time as adults interacting and accepting and acknowledging people with differences, or in this case with disabilities? And then part, as you know, the tagline for TFI is teaching the process of unlearning to learn. And what's so powerful to me about that is I begin to reflect on this quote. I remember when my son was about 2 years old and we were in the supermarket, and my son is a talker. I don't know where he got that from, but he loves to talk. And so we were walking through the aisle, and he's going on and on and on. And as we turned down one aisle, there was a gentleman that was apparently a vet, that was obvious as well. And he had no legs. Okay. He was in a wheelchair. And my son said, "Mother, look, that man has no legs." So what do you think I said to him? Good observation. No. What do we do in that case? We'd go, "Shh, come on, stop," and just keep moving. What is the message are we sending to children at that point? We're telling them that it is not good or nice to acknowledge or notice differences like that, as if the man did not know he had no legs. What would have been a better approach? So what happens to all of us growing up in a culture where we're taught to pretend that we don't see the physical differences or the physical disabilities, that in it itself, and so you grow up, it's inherent in you to pretend that you don't see it, to pretend that it's invisible. So that's why I like the quote, because you know what, let's stop pretending, let's acknowledge, let's see the difference, and then let's see beyond the difference. So that's what I think when I hear the quote or see the quote.
I love that so much. Before we started this live stream, we were showing Rebeca the slides to make sure nothing caught her unawares. And she saw the quote and she said, "I love this quote." So I'm going to throw Rebeca in the hot seat now and say, what would you add to what Dr. Carrie just said?
Well, I would add what comes to mind for me when I read this quote is how, I didn't fully understand how the world is for those who are disabled until my son was born with a visible disability. I'm still trying to understand more and more each day. It makes me look at my own unconscious bias. Am I putting limits on people based on preconceived notions? An example of where this quote took me mentally was when I was visiting my friend's farm. I took both of my kids up in a sprayer for the crops. It was really exciting. And I told them, hey, boys, you could be farmers when you grow up. This is so exciting. This is so great. And my friends started talking about how it was near impossible to get into farming without being born into it or having a lot of money. But anyways, I immediately got a little bit irritated because I thought that complexity is not the point. If either of my kids wanted to get into farming, there would be, unique challenges for each of them, but I don't want them to view it as not possible based off of someone else's viewpoint. So I share that to explain what I would like for people, including myself, to see others with a starting viewpoint of how they might view themselves and their abilities.
That is such an amazing thought, what you just said. I think so frequently we say things and we don't realize the impact it might be having on the other people that we are surrounded by, right? Like, I'm sure your friend didn't intentionally say that with that thought process to that, your son, neither of your sons can actually be farmers, right? But there are these limitations that are put on people just naturally. And I'm sure, Carrie, as you have worked with so many different organizations and groups of people and individuals, that that you've seen this happen all the time in the world. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And the other part of that too is, and I shared this with Rebecca, we had a conversation, was that I also experienced that. Okay, several years ago, I was hit by a car while walking across the street in New York, and both my legs and my left collarbone. I was in a wheelchair. They told me that I would probably never walk again, and on and on and on. But that's not part of this story. The part of the story is what I experienced in a wheelchair. I was still working. I was vice president an organization at the time, and when I was able to return to work, I had someone, I had an assistant to, travel with me. And it was fascinating to me, like in a city where they say, we accommodate and everything, you can't even cross the street because there's a lip. In the office that I worked in, you couldn't even go to the bathroom because when you in order to get into the bathroom, they had a lip there that you had to somehow lift, which you can't do in a wheelchair by yourself unless you have someone. And the last thing I'll say that was fascinating was even like my at that time my partner, we went go to a restaurant, and the maitre d' would look at him and sometimes and say, where would she like to sit? Or they would look down at me and in a loud voice go, ma'am, what would you like? And I was like, my legs, not my ears. I mean, but just the what was interesting was what I experienced and how people responded and reacted to me because I was in a wheelchair, as if there was nothing else that was functioning in my body. So it was almost like an experiment, which of course I wouldn't break my legs to have an experiment, but it was almost like an experiment for the work. And it just gave me such a deeper insight in terms of disability and what it's like and what that experience is like. And so, for 6 months I had that experience. So that's what I would add to this conversation.
First of all, I'm sorry I didn't know you had broken your legs. Like, that's a terrible experience just in and of itself. But I think it's interesting that you call it unconscious bias, right, Rebecca, where people they don't recognize or they don't realize that they're putting their own bias on someone just based on how they look or what they perceive to be the disability even. So very interesting. Okay, so this kind of leads us directly into our first question for the day. So I'm going to throw up the first question, and Carrie, we're actually going to direct this one at Carrie first. No, we're going to direct this one to Rebecca. I'm sorry.
I was like, oh, maybe Anna changed it. Okay.
We're going to play musical chairs for a minute, and then we're going to ask the question.
All right, Rebecca. Ready, Anna?
Yeah. So, Rebecca, This is the work you do full time, and you specifically work within the military family community. But your experience, I know, translates outside of that to the greater population. So can you talk for a little bit about what are the challenges that are facing caregivers and those with disabilities when it comes to finding meaningful employment?
Yeah. So, and like I mentioned, I'm learning too. Every day I learn about more and more things when it comes to this topic. But I think that first, it's a challenge to be seen. Our employers understanding that the disabled and caregiver population exists as a potential labor pool. We're here, we exist, we want to work. Are you targeting us? Do you see us? There are a lot of challenges, for those with disabilities. There can be a wide range of challenges. And I'll just talk to your previous story about being in a wheelchair. There can be physical access challenges within a brick and mortar building, or even challenges with transportation just to get to that building. A good example of this is most people expect, like I used to live in DC, and you expect an Uber in the DC area to get to you quickly, right? Well, what if you need an accessible Uber? The wait is longer, or it may not even be available. And not all locations are located close to a train stop. So all of these are, challenges when it comes to the individual with a disability, like, seeking meaningful employment, going out to places. There's also like the challenge of, like I mentioned before, the bias, the preconceived notions. When you visualize, like as an employer, this is where my brain goes. When you visualize your diverse workforce, does it include those with disabilities? Like I see a lot of graphics depicting racial and gender differences, but not a lot of visible disabilities. And it's a powerful statement to see that from your company. Are you accepting? Do you have it out there that you are accepting? Are you accepting of one type of disability over another? This is another kind of issue within the population. Like there's maybe in your brain, you think, well, I can accept somebody with a physical disability because of your bias. But are you looking at the intellectual or mental health disability populations? Access challenges for even those who are disabled and for caregivers can be hidden within the application and interview process. For example, does your application process have accommodations built in? Are there flexible times to interview? There is saying you're ADA compliant, and then there is actually doing and including with ADA compliance. And that's really what it means to be compliant. And this is when I'll give a shout out to the ada.gov website, which I can drop into the comments, because there's a lot. I mean, there's the law. You should know the law, of course, but there's a lot of other good information in there that can help employers. For example, an excerpt from the website, and I'll just read some of this, is hiring technologies, right, with algorithms. Even when an employer does not mean to discriminate, its use of a hiring technology may lead to unlawful discrimination. For example, some hiring technologies try to predict who will be good employees by comparing applicants to current employees. But if you don't have anybody with disabilities on your staff, they're not in the same pool. So employers must carefully evaluate the information used to build these algorithms. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that. But those are some of my thoughts on the challenges facing caregivers when they're trying to find meaningful employment. Are they being targeted? And there's accommodations even in the targeting process that need to be looked at or should be looked at.
I think that was a very well-rounded answer where you hit on a lot of different areas. Carrie, I'm going to throw you into the hot seat. I'm going to change the question just a tiny bit. I know I'm going rogue a little bit here, but I want to ask you this. All those things that Rebeca just talked about, whose job is it to make sure those things are happening within an organization? Like how, the same thing, right? These challenges that are facing caregivers or those with disabilities, whose job is it to make sure that it is accessible within an organization to do that?
Well, first of all, it starts with the leadership. I mean, the leadership and then the entire organization being educated to their own unconscious biases, if you will. Because you can get, I could initially say the human resources department, the people that's doing the hiring, when in actuality, the entire organization has to have a better understanding. Because if we target the HR department to make sure that they begin to hire people, with disabilities, and you put them in an environment where the people do not understand or accept their own biases, then the person is going to leave. That's not creating an inclusive environment. You can't just bring them in. Okay, we're going to go out there and teach you how to recruit and bring folks in, and then you do it. Now what? Okay, how long will they stay if they don't feel that whole sense of belonging? Or people are remembering, like my son, when you're taught at 2 years old, pretend that they don't have a disability. When you see them, act like you don't see them. Going to do if I'm working in an environment. I want to be seen, I want to be acknowledged, I want to be accepted. So I would say first and foremost is organizations getting the proper training and understanding and seeing their unconscious bias. For one example, when we teach diversity, equity, inclusion, Rebecca, one of the things that we do is in part of the slides and the exercises that we give people is actually looking at, you need to hire somebody for this position. Which one of these people will you hire? It will be someone in a wheelchair, it will be someone with a disability. And then having created an environment where people feel safe in the workshop, when they say, I don't know if I would hire that person. And then I was asked why. And a lot of times they'll say because of the physical structure of their work location, it could not accommodate. And then other times it's like, I don't know, it just feels weird to me. So again, we have conversation about it. So it's the training and the education or the relearning that has to take place as well. And in response to your question. So again, I would point out leadership recognizing and acknowledging the necessity to train not only themselves, but also their workforce to create an environment that is going to be inclusive of everyone. And the other thing that we have to be very mindful of is, and I used to teach this in the class as well, that 90% of all disabilities are invisible. And right now we did some last week, and it's 95%. 95%. So that means if we're trying to, as Rebeca is saying, match or look at people from past performances of people that work in our environment, we will be missing a lot of people. So we have to be very mindful of the assessments that we use to assess potential employers. And so a lot of times we look at that in organizations. What are you doing when I'm working as a consultant in an organization? Before I help them with a DEI strategic plan, one of the things that we ask them is, what have you been doing? What does your literature look like? What are you sending out to people? And sometimes it's just something as simple as the colors that they use or the font that they use in developing something is too small, or it's not, if you're legally blind, okay, considered legally blind, you can't read half the stuff. So we have to dig deep like that. So that's where TFI comes in. We do that kind of work. And hopefully there's a lot more people doing this, teaching the same thing as well.
That, Carrie, wow, right? I mean, yes, that is absolutely, well, I mean, it's not the answer I was looking for because I don't really know the answer necessarily.
No, I look, I want to jump in here, right? I managed restaurants for 20 years, and part of my job was to hire. And you can just tell how much it's come from 20 years ago till now, because you're so right. There was no inclusion in and being mindful of when you interview, when you hire as a leader to bring people into your organization. And so I don't know. This is a great conversation, and I'm glad it's leading this way instead of the way that it was for me 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know.
And then I did drop the ADA link, Rebeca, that you had mentioned down below. So can you just tell people like what they're going to be able to find at that link and what it can do for them if they have questions?
Yeah, sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute button. But yeah,
I would have reminded you.
Don't worry, Anna would have called you out. She would have said, Rebeca.
It's just a great resource. I mean, I find it pretty easy to navigate. It gives you practical scenarios as well. So there's a little table, I think, on the front page where it's like, well, I want to do this. What are some ways to make it, accommodating? And it gives you some examples for people who are legally blind, as you mentioned, or people who are hard of hearing or deaf. It tells you what to do about service dogs and just all those kind of, I feel like it's very useful because it answers your practical questions about employment, right? Whereas, you can give me a statute to read and I might read that statute. Yes, but will I understand it and how it's applied practically? No, maybe not without some additional help. And that's how I feel about the website.
Okay. So moving on from that, then, while we have you in the hot seat, Rebeca, let me just throw up our second question, sure. which is actually being able to reach the disabled or the caregiver population. Are there specific places? Is there a specific way? Is there an organization? I mean, where is it that organizations can be going and reaching out to in order to make sure that the disabled and caregiver populations are actually hearing about work opportunities that might be available when there is organizations consciously trying to make a more inclusive environment and create those spaces?
So this is I found this one to be a really hard question. And I thought about it for quite some time because this is a hard question to reach anybody that you want to employ, right? How are you going to find them? How are you going to find people that, may not know that you're open to this or that you have these great accommodations. My thought is that you can go out to your state, local nonprofits, right? There is a lot of nonprofit organizations out there. There's the ARC is one that I can think of nationally. Of course, I can think of my own organization, Exceptional Families of the Military, but I also think about in my world with Down syndrome. My son has Down syndrome. My local Down syndrome association sometimes will send me information about companies that have reached out to them that are looking to hire people with Down syndrome. So those are the types of organizations I would look out to advertise to, that people will even know to come to your company. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, also having verbiage or graphics on your website or social media that has the terminology in there that is accepting of people who are disabled or their caregivers can be an important signal too. Because if I'm searching online for a job and I see something that is positive, like me as a caregiver, if I see something that is positive for caregivers, I'm like, wow, this company might be open to flexible hours. They're saying they want to hire caregivers. So that's my thought on it.
So making sure essentially to follow up the messaging when you are reaching out, make sure that your brand messaging fits the message you're trying to get out to those organizations that you mentioned. Carrie, are there other places or locations that you would recommend, or other things that organizations can do?
Yes, it's interesting. It's something like Selena was mentioning too, how things have changed so much over the last 20 years. And I would venture to say social media is huge. Just again, piggybacking on what Rebeca is saying, so many companies right now, I mean, if not all, okay, are on social media, all forms of social media. When you are hiring, they have no problem writing or putting on social media that they are hiring or that they're looking, or sometimes just driving in, I'm all over the place, outside of the US as well. But I even here where I am now in Vancouver, there are signs, we're hiring. Well, why don't you add something to the fact that, the inclusive hiring, add something that lets people know that that's what you're doing. And similarly, if I'm interested in a company, I'm going to go on their site. So again, when we work with companies, one of the things that's very important is that they have a DEI statement that they put, just like their mission and vision statement, that they have a statement that is an inclusive statement that lets people know, okay, because you're going to see words, trigger words, buzzwords, that's going to let you know that this company is open to, this company is willing to, give me a chance or an opportunity. So I think that there are numerous ways, and even in their brochures and marketing, because again, companies are marketing. And when I look at TV commercials, I'm beginning to see Target is one where I will see they bring in diversity in their commercials on TV. So again, because of the work that we do at TFI, I'm tuned into that. I'm always observing that, what's going on, what's happening. I'll go to a country or something, I'll go like, this country is nowhere near prepared to even deal with anyone with any disabilities. So I'm constantly paying attention to that. And when we work with companies, we also make sure that they begin to become more focused on that. In fact, we had one company that sent us the draft of their newsletter that they started to send out. And immediately one of the things we noticed that the colors that they were using would not be appropriate when you are speaking, okay, and also helping the companies that are doing a lot online in terms of being able to make sure that if you don't, for the hearing impaired, and also paying attention to the language that you're using and also the words, because people are still also reading lips. So there's so many little things that we want to make them aware of, so that they're getting this information out and people know that it's possible for them to get a job there, or at the very least to compete for a job, because they're going to be accepted.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that that's an attractive quality, in my opinion, for any employee. Like when you see that messaging of, you see, oh, well, I might want to work there because it looks like they really have their act together and it's going to be a good place to work. I mean, I think it benefits when you target the whole population. It benefits the whole population.
Absolutely. it is, and it's not just messaging just for a caregiver or just for a disabled person, right? I mean, we as humans all living this human experience together, to know that there's support network or inclusiveness happening at an organization, in my mind, like what you just said, Rebeca, would reflect very well on that organization just as a whole, that they're thinking these things through, that they want a culture and a place where people are accepted and admired and valued for what they bring to the table. And that is like one of the biggest reasons people are departing or, leaving their jobs at this point, right? Like, is that culture that's been being created where they don't feel like they're valued where they are.
Yeah, I want to share. I had a nephew that was special needs, and he this is again like 15 years ago, but through the state they got him a job with his aide, and he loved it. Was his favorite thing, and he worked at the grocery store, and he almost became like a little celebrity, and everybody, all the patrons that would go in would be like, "Hey, Peter," he was nonverbal, but you knew that he was just felt blessed and he was happy, and he would get the carts, and he just, everybody knew him, all the neighborhood that would come into grocery shop. And I just what I like now is obviously that was given to him because it was through the state and they did programs to help get them jobs in the community. But now you see more marketing where it is more inclusive, which is what I love what Dr. Carrie does. But I just you said something that sparked that, and I always think about it, and it created a wonderful culture within. Whenever he was like working during the shift, they would be like, "Hey, Peter, I'm getting milk today." And just the interaction for him was just so wonderful.
So as we're talking about these organizations and creating this culture, just throwing this next question out there, what are the accommodations? What are the work arrangements that we need to be thinking about as small business owners, large corporation owners, hiring, human resources teams? And, what is it we should be thinking about when we talk about supporting individuals with disabilities or caregivers? Who wants to answer? First one. Oh, look, Rebeca gets it.
Sure. I'll actually piggyback on the story of your family member. So, like, a lot of people have family members. And so, like, if you talk to your employees who have disabilities or know people with disabilities, the possibilities are really endless to kind of get ideas. I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, a lot of people come up to me because Winston's, my youngest son with Down syndrome, his disability is very visible. So I'll have people come up to me in the military environment and they'll talk about disabilities that are not visible and they'll want help. So, because I'm there and they see me, and with Winston, it's like a way to connect and a way to find information out. And I would say the same thing applies within a work environment, that you can find information like that organically. I'm going to put my caregiver hat on for a second and say that, for caregivers, flexibility is really important. The life of a caregiver can be full of appointments and wildly different schedules week to week. Is there an opportunity for MaxiFlex, telework? Is there a job that a person could do that they could respond the day or night as their time allows? I mentioned this because I am retired military, but I started off prior enlisted and later became an officer, and I wanted to spend more time in. I retired. I actually had to get out on a hardship that required approval from the Secretary of the Air Force because I had a time commitment, even though I was past 20 years. And it's because the military environment is unique and it does not apply to the civilian world. However, there just wasn't enough flexibility, right? And it was very devastating for me as a caregiver. And so when I'm looking into jobs, I need something that I have 23 years of contracting experience, right? So if I was looking for a job in contracting, which I'm not, I'm doing this nonprofit stuff. I would only be replying to people who would allow me MaxiFlex. So I could review contracts and maybe write contracts at midnight or at 8 a.m. So that's just an example. But also, does your organization have a great health plan? That's another thing that can be an accommodation, not accommodation really, but a benefit for the whole family, especially if you have somebody who is a caregiver that is looking for that good medical care. And that's for all of your employees. But man, if I found a company out there that had a really great health plan that could support my child with special needs, I just might work for you until the day I die. That's the kind of loyalty. From a disability perspective, I'm thinking about the restaurant thing because I don't know, it's just coming to mind. So sometimes people with intellectual disabilities or even physical disabilities get off track to get a high school diploma. So this can happen unknown to them, unknown to their parents. You get a piece of paper that says you graduated, but it's not an actual high school diploma. So if you're hiring at a restaurant, for example, and a high school diploma is, something that you have to check yes to get hired there, is that really a requirement for the job? That's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that it might not be a requirement for the job for you to have a United States high school diploma. Those are some of the accommodations or, constraints, things that I think of when it comes to, having people wanting to go to an organization or either being, shut out. So if I was hiring at the restaurant, I would want to say, well, a high school diploma isn't really necessary for waiting tables. What I need you to do is be able to wait tables good.
That, Rebeca, just that one small example you just gave is so poignant about like the high school diploma, because it's a standard, I think, on an application form. We just use the same application form we've always used, and there's not much thought put into what it's actually asking for, and is it relevant for the job that we want to hire for. It's like a data collection as opposed to, but what it does is it builds a wall or a barrier saying you don't qualify for this job anymore because it's written right here on the application. Do you or do you not have a high school diploma? Now there's a wall or a barrier built if somebody hasn't made that, reached that part of their life at that point, if they don't have that. That's really interesting. Carrie, what other kinds of things have you seen in your work with organizations?
Well, first of all, Rebeca, that's like so on point in terms of what is needed. Even as I listen to this conversation, and certainly I'm enjoying the conversation as well, I'm reflecting upon something that we said earlier. Like we a couple of times we mentioned how things have changed over the last 20 years. And yet what we're dealing with when we talk about barriers, the barriers for the most part are the antiquated ways, and I use the word antiquated, are the ways things have been done up to this point. So it's almost like when I put on my consultant hat, it's almost like listening to a conversation and being a part of a conversation where these are the things that need to change because they're not working. And then my question becomes, well, why aren't they working? Well, because the rules that and the possible policies and procedures that were applied to this of like from the 1900s, and I'm being facetious, sort of, kind of, but you understand my point. It's like that the rules that apply. And so when you ask people, whether it's the military or the federal government or just corporations, whatever, schools, all of that is like, this is what we decided back in 1928. And so, we don't even think about it now. We just apply it now. Well, when we look at how much things have changed, we're not riding around on horse and buggies. Okay, we were doing that in 1928. And so again, it's like, how do we make sure that all of these things that are still in place are revamped so that it's more appropriate for now? Okay, we didn't know as much as we know now about people with disabilities, and certainly one of the reasons why people with invisible disabilities, it's almost like you don't even want to tell one. because, for fear that you're going to be, like ostracized, or people are going to look at you like you're strange, or if you're like me in a wheelchair with 2 broken legs and people screaming at me because that means that if I have a disability, I'm unable to hear. I mean, come on. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of what I would say revamping, because it's the revamping that has to take unlearning and re-educating or relearning what is appropriate now. And I'm so grateful that we have a community of people, and people like Rebeca working in it that say, wait a moment, what about us? Okay, because that's what it's taken. Like before, you're invisible, be quiet, shh, don't let anyone we don't even want people to notice you. We're like, no, that's unacceptable now. I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
No, yeah, I want to say this, right? I feel like a lot of business owners, right, they're building this business and then now they have to hire staff. And like most of the time, they're going to some template in application that they found that is, like you said, it could be very antiquated, right? And then all of a sudden that now becomes part of their documents that they will start using, not understanding really all of the things, because they're like, okay, I need something for them to fill out.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
but most of the time they're grabbing stuff, and it's like trying to make that start where these templates are being created, as far as like, hey, if you're sharing this with a business to have applications, you should consider these for your templates, that you're giving out.
I want to add something that's very interesting, because I've been looking for new office space for us in where I live in the town that I live in, and it's a very small, and I like kind of small, antiquated. I mean, I grew up in New York. I don't do big cities anymore. I like small, antiquated, and my realtor found me an amazing space. I was so excited. I went to the space, and I had someone from the team go with me, how we can set it up and whatnot. And I was like, I mean, so close to taking it, right? Because it was light, bright windows and everything. And as I was driving home, I said, what's not working for me with this space? I couldn't figure it out, but I was like, but it's perfect. And then it dawned on me, I had to walk up a flight of stairs to get to it because they had no elevator.
Mm.
And then the parking, you had to park across the street in the public parking. You didn't have to pay for parking, which is good for anyone that's going to work there or whatever. But you had to walk across the street, come across the street, and then walk up a flight of stairs. And I said, I can't do that, and then yet there's nothing in that town that I could rent. I have to go to, because the very old, antiquated, beautiful town, one of those kind of like little East Coast towns, if you will. But there's nothing in the town. You can't even get into the stores without walking up a few steps.
Yeah.
Okay, so let alone, and all of the offices and everything is either a few steps or it's on the second floor, and there are no elevators because it's a very old town. So that's a perfect example of what I'm saying. I mean, look at what we'd have to like demolish a town to make it accessible. Work with me here. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous, not in that fact that it has to be done, but ridiculous in the fact that this is what we're facing. Okay, and the mindset that we have to change, and somehow make at least not demolish the town, but what can we get a few people and help from the state or the federal government to actually make some accommodations for some, if I was to get something there. So I mean, that's what I believe we're up against. Would you agree, Rebeca?
100%, 100%. It's and it can be very challenging, just in general. Like with what you're describing, like I can see it. I've lived all over the world, and like the East Coast, the steps, the small spaces to get through can be very challenging. And just being part of your community and being in voting with your city and whatnot, you can say that those things matter. I mean, we've had initiatives where we work with one of our partners for housing and Armed Forces housing advocates. And one of our things that we've worked together on is trying to get the sidewalks corrected in base housing. Very simple thing, right? Or accommodations within base housing, but this can be applied to the community spaces as well on base, or out in your community, but it's important to let people know that you care about this, right? When you vote, like, is the person thinking about these things when they are doing the city planning, and are they thinking about these things when they're building new buildings?
Yeah. It's all about being intentional, right? When you're making choices about where to spend the money, where the the services and go, and all of that kind of thing. Carrie, I loved your soapbox, as you called it, right? I loved your soapbox. I felt like it was almost like a challenge to people, right? To just say, hey, are you being intentional about this? Are you thinking about it? Because if you're not, take a minute. Because there could have been somebody that was like, yes, I love this space, I'm signing on the dot, and then regretted it a month later, going, whoa, I didn't even stop and think about the fact that there's 24 stairs somebody has to go across, and a road they have to cross, and before they can reach me and what I can offer them. And that's going to limit your ability then to reach the disabled population in some aspects, right? So I'm just going to throw that out there. Carrie just challenged everybody that's listening, catching the replay. So, we would love to hear from you in your social media or through email, or just as a comment here. Like, what are you doing? Are you being intentional about thinking through these processes? So we are coming up on the end of our live stream. So we're going to jump to our final thought. And I kind of love this final thought because it's about creating community and support. And this is kind of what we talked about. It kind of rounds it back to where we were at the beginning of the conversation with that quote. So our last question and final thought of the day is, what strategies and initiatives are going to create a sense of community and support? And we say among employees, but I'm just going to say in general for this marginalized group of people. What is it our communities and our organizations, our businesses need to be doing and thinking about? Carrie, you're in the hot seat. So, Selena put you there. So
I will sit here. It's a nice, comfortable seat working with the two of you anyway. And certainly having Rebeca here too. I would say everything that we've been talking about on today, I think is just really valuable. Understanding that we have almost like a forgotten population of people. And something that Rebeca said earlier, which is so true. A lot of when people think diversity or DEI, they think of race and gender. And those are very important components. They're not the only components. So let's make sure that we begin to broaden if we're saying that we want to create an inclusive community. I challenge people to sit down and ask themselves, what does that mean? Who has been forgotten? Who's forgotten in terms of a population or that we don't even think about? And begin to make sure that and once we came up with our list, the next question is, what are we going to do about including them? When we start talking about the people with disabilities, then look around your community, look around your house. Can you invite someone to your house that's disabled? Okay, and would they be able to come in and be comfortable? Let's start with that. And then look in your workplace. Is your workplace in an environment that would be accommodating for people with any type of physical disabilities? And then your church, your community center, the stores that you visit, start paying attention. When you're walking across the street, if you have to go you're in a mall and you have to go to the restroom and they say, we have there's a bathroom there for someone with disabilities. Could they even get in the bathroom? Okay, when you're watching programs and whatnot, if you had an issue with whether it's hearing impairment or sight, would this be, start asking yourselves questions, because if we're talking about unity and creating unity, then we're going to have to start thinking outside of ourselves, expanding our awareness and what's out there. And then if you find that when you look through your checklist and you think that, while most of these I'm checking, no, it doesn't exist, then the next question is, what can you do about it? Are you running for office? Are you running for the school board? Are you running for the city council? If so, what is your agenda? Okay, can you include that? Something like Rebeca was saying earlier, can you include that in the agenda? If you're running for state, when we're having politicians, talk to your politicians. What are they doing? They're asking you for their vote. What are they willing to do about this hidden or this invisible population of people? So I'm off the soapbox again.
Clearly, you can see I love that question you asked. Who is forgotten? Rebecca, what would you add to what Carrie has said today?
I'll just add that, can you think of a more valuable tool than to have someone on your team whose thought process has been shaped differently, right, due to a disability? Their brain may even be wired completely different, right? Neurodiversity. This might be an excellent person to go to when you're trying to find an out-of-the-box type solution, right? It's, really pushing the envelope on diversity of thought. And this was mentioned earlier, but I'll also add that inclusion, is the day-to-day as well. So it's being part of a team day-to-day. So if you have a group activity where you are, maybe doing one of those brainstorming sessions where you're like sticking sticky notes on the wall or whatever, is this an accommodating and inclusive environment for everybody on your team? It's important to think about it day to day. I'll give a very small example. I've spent a lot of time at the hospital, and I was at a hotel next to the hospital in the Mayo Clinic, and the staff there, the breakfast, everybody goes for the free breakfast in the morning in the hotel. Well, hopefully. The counters were lowered, and it made it easy for everybody to kind of grab stuff. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And that was their business model. They're like, hey, we want to make sure everybody can access this free breakfast, not only the people that we employ, but the people that we are serving. And I was like, I will now stay at this hotel every single time I come here. So that's all I had to add. And I really, really appreciate this conversation. It's been very exciting for me. I just love it.
Yes.
We absolutely loved you here. And I know Dr. Carrie has. And I think these have been all super important conversations. There's so many topics today in itself that we just talked about,
I think my biggest takeaway really was just about being intentional. And like you just said, Rebecca, this is the day-to-day thing. This is not next month we're going to discuss how to be inclusive and we'll come up with one idea we can implement. This is something that needs to permeate just like any other, business model, if you want to call it that way, for an organization, right? It needs to be part of every thought process that you're doing. Which is why I'm going to leave that little scrolling quote by Carrie, who's forgotten, and then do something about it. Like that really is that is it. So
it's two very simple questions. They're not complex at all. So I think it's very easy. I know before we close out, we'd love to share, Rebecca, where everybody can kind of find where you are and how to connect. So I'm going to pull that up and let you share that with everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm very passionate about what I do, and what we do is we help the 146,000 people enrolled in Department of Defense Exceptional Family Member Program, which is a fancy way of saying military families with special needs. We have support groups, and we also do advocacy, both with the Department of Defense leadership and with legislators. And we also do one-on-one assistance where we help military families with the bureaucracy of the DoD. So these are the places where you can reach me, or if you need help, know a military family that needs help, you can reach out to me as well for that, and we will help you.
I have quite a few friends that I definitely want to make sure that they are aware of. They probably already are. You know what I mean, Rebecca? Like, you guys are amazing at what you do. So, okay, let's see. What is our next? Oh, yeah, we're so excited, Dr. Carrie, about this next thing, aren't we?
Yes, we are. we have a brand new 2024 inclusion calendar that's come out. Now, if you've gotten the past versions of the Folk Institute's inclusion calendar and then their inclusion planner, this one's going to blow you away. There was a lot of extra work put into this one. Celebrates holidays and holy days around the world, is a great way to start being, again, intentional on a regular basis about the people that surround you, what they might be worshiping, how they might be worshiping, how they might be celebrating, what might be going on in their families. Months that celebrate things like disabilities, disability employment, caregiving employment, they actually exist. And so by downloading our new 2024 inclusion calendar, you will have it right at your fingertips. So I dropped the link in the comments. We encourage everyone watching this or catching the replay to go to grab that calendar, download it, and hang it up and use it as part of your annual planning for everything that you're doing.
You know what, Anna, if I may, I just want to add that the inclusion calendar was born out of, again, we all need calendars. We use calendars all the time. And around October is the time that you get your calendar for the new year, or sooner if you have to. And one of the things that I thought would be a good way of teaching people about inclusion, that is if we created a calendar that looked at all of the hidden, invisible, or marginalized groups, and share what it is that they celebrate. So that's why, to me, it's holidays and holy days, and use that as an opportunity to learn about other people, other groups, and also acknowledging other people and other groups, because now you have a new awareness. So that's what the inclusion calendar was born out of. And each year it does get better and better in terms of the graphics and the information as people share additional information with us. Well, what about this holiday, that holiday, or holy day? And then we add that and we use that. And we also, with our clients, they then use that as part of their newsletter to acknowledge people within their organization. So it's a teaching and learning tool as well.
It's so fabulous. I mean, I can tell you there have been things that I looked and I said, what is that? And Google at my fingertips, right? Just to find out more about what that holiday or holy day is. That's exactly, it is a teaching tool. It is, I am living proof that it's working.
Well, thank you.
So jump on that link and grab your calendar today. And then next, just before we close out and before we say our goodbyes, next month's live stream is going to be happening on November 14th at 1:00 p.m. Eastern. Our guest is still TBD. We're still confirming, but we have somebody very exciting in mind. So we hope that you'll be able to mark your calendars for November 14th, 1:00, and join us then. Carrie, Rebeca, thank you so much for this conversation and for sharing your thoughts on this topic. We really appreciate having you both here today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Carrie, you're muted.
Oh, I know. I wanted you to say that one more time. It was needed. So I did that intentionally. You're right.
You passed, Anna. You passed.
You passed. That's right. Good job. Good job. Rebecca, I just want to say thank you. I'm glad that you agreed to have this conversation with us today, and just really enjoyed the insight and your passion and what you shared. And just, however we can support you, we would like to be able to continue to do that as well, because you're doing like really good work. And I'm just excited when anyone's out there doing the work that's necessary to actually create the environment or a world where everybody feels like they belong and they get what they need to. So thank you for the work that you.
Thank you too.
All right. We will see everybody next month. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.